You know, I've talked a lot about Persona and Megami Tensei on this channel, and don't worry, I'm not going to change the focus of it or anything like that, but ever since Persona 5 came out, that's the only thing Atlus has been getting recognition for, and there are a lot of people that seem to think that the only thing they've ever done is Megami Tensei and Persona, when in reality, that's not true at all. Megami Tensei has and always will be Atlus's flagship franchise, there's no doubt about that, but unfortunately, that overshadows a lot of the other games they've done too, especially in the case of Atlus USA, you know, the company responsible for publishing Atlus's titles in North America. They've also given us games from other Japanese developers that, had it not been for them, we probably never would have got. It's kind of hard to imagine a Japanese game not getting localized in today's gaming industry, but believe it or not, there was a time where we would be lucky to get a game that wasn't from a popular franchise. Atlus USA was one of those companies that would localize all the Japanese games that the other bigger publishers wanted nothing to do with, and because of it, we got some pretty great gems. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. A few of the more underrated games from Atlus, whether they be games Atlus developed themselves that just got swept under the rug, or Atlus USA localized games that everyone just kind of forgot about. And the first one is one I've been dying to talk about for quite a long time, a game called Operation Darkness. Developed and published by Success in Japan in 2007, and then localized for North America by Atlus in 2008. Operation Darkness is a tactical, turn-based strategy RPG for the Xbox 360 set in alternate history World War II. Needless to say, this game flopped in sales. On top of it being exclusive to a console where SRPGs didn't exactly connect with the console's audience, this game also received some pretty condemning feedback from critics. It currently sits at a Metascore of 46, with IGN giving it a score of 2.5 out of 10. Just to put that into perspective, that's almost a point less than what they gave Superman 64. I mean, heck, it's even lower than what they gave God Hand. Dang. Operation Darkness isn't without its flaws, but I'm here to tell you that despite what the gaming media says about it, it is a great game, and it's also one of the most unique SRPGs I've ever played. Much like Fire Emblem, Operation Darkness uses a grid, but being set in World War II, unlike Fire Emblem's medieval fantasy setting where battles are fought with swords, lances, and bows, Operation Darkness uses guns, meaning you'll be fighting enemies from much further away and have to factor in things like cover when positioning yourself. You also have a large variety of weapons: rifles, pistols, submachine guns, light machine guns, rocket launchers, grenades, everything you would expect from a World War II game, with each weapon subtype having its own unique properties to be used for different situations. There's also a weight mechanic. Each weapon has its own weight value, so the more you're carrying, the less often you'll be able to move. The same goes for reserve ammo and healing items, so while it's important that your loadout contains as much stuff as you need, you also need to be careful that you don't take too much. However, if you do find yourself unable to pack something that you needed, there's also the ability to loot enemies. After you kill an enemy, you can go up to his body and take whatever equipment he has. So if you forgot to bring something into battle, or ran out of ammo, or ran out of health packs, chances are a dead enemy will have what you need. Some enemies also contain special items, so it's advised that you loot every single enemy before ending the battle. Operation Darkness's gameplay isn't comparable to anything I've ever seen in an SRPG before, but you know what? All these mechanics come together and work really well. Combine this with the difficulty, and it makes for a really fun and intense game. It's rare for a game to make you strategize this much and think about everything you're doing. It's also pretty lengthy for an SRPG, taking me about 50 hours to beat, not counting all the times I died and had to start the mission over. Although I found the story for Operation Darkness a little disappointing, and I was really looking forward to it too because World War II on the Western Front isn't something you see covered a lot in Japanese media. Unfortunately, the pacing was awkward, the characters weren't developed very well, and the dialogue was incredibly cheesy. Although the voice acting was really good. I was honestly surprised by how great the voice work was. It actually has an all-star cast featuring Troy Baker, Yuri Lowenthal, and Derek Stephen Prince, just to name a few. Operation Darkness is also a little rough around the edges. The graphics are, well, horrible, it has occasional frame rate drops, and the camera is a little wonky, even though it's not as bad as everyone says it is. But if you can tolerate that, you just might be in for a good deal of enjoyment with Operation Darkness. If you're looking for a unique SRPG experience that you can't get anywhere else, or a reason to blow the dust off your 360, you can't go wrong with this game. I got this game complete in box for just $2, although every time I check the price online, it seems to go up. I don't know if this game is gaining some kind of cult following, causing the value to go up, but unfortunately, that's the case with a lot of Atlus games due to their short prints. So if you're interested, I'd say get it now before it goes up to a ridiculous amount like a lot of other Atlus games. Alright, so the next game I want to talk about is a game for the PS3 called Aquaplus Dream Match. Released for arcades in 2011 before being ported to the PS3 in 2012, and then released in North America in 2013 by you-know-who. This game is developed by Examu, who also developed the Arcana Heart series and Nitro Plus Blaster's Heroine's Infant Duel for PS4. So, what is Aquaplus? It's a crossover fighting game with characters from Aquaplus games. And in case you didn't know who Aquaplus is, they're a company that publishes adult visual novels. Like, adult as in... Yeah, as if the fighting game genre wasn't ridiculous enough, someone at Examu and Aquaplus decided they were going to make a fighting game out of characters from adult visual novels. But what baffles me even more is the fact that this game actually got an official release in the West thanks to Atlus. I mean, when this game came out when I was a kid, I didn't know who any of these characters were. I didn't know about games or adult visual novels or any of that crap. Oh, who am I kidding? Of course I was into this stuff when I was a kid, but I never actually played any of the ones from Aquaplus, although since I started playing this game, I started watching the anime adaptation of White Album 2, and you know what? It's actually kinda good. Now, I vaguely remember hearing about this game when it came out in 2013, but it was around that exact same time when the PS4 and Xbox One were coming out, so any traction that this game might have gained didn't stick around for long. The gameplay is pretty standard for a 2D anime-style fighter. You have weak attacks, medium attacks, heavy attacks, very heavy attacks, super attacks, combos. Whatever staple things fighting games have, this game has it. This game also has a thing called an emotion meter that punishes campy playstyles and encourages you to take on a more aggressive playstyle, which is great for me since that's how I usually play in most fighting games. Other than that, though, this game doesn't really do anything all that revolutionary for the fighting game genre, but the sheer ridiculousness of the concept is what made me include this game on here. I don't know what it is, but seeing these characters fight as opposed to these or these somehow just makes it all the more fun. On top of that, this game looks beautiful, and the music is awesome too. Unfortunately, whatever player base this game had at one point is all but dead now. I was completely unable to find an online match, and I don't think I've ever seen this game at any kind of event before. Though it does have a good amount of single-player content to make up for this, and you can always invite a few of your buddies over and fight it out in this game. On top of that, this game is also pretty cheap. I got it a few weeks ago off the shelf at GameStop for just $5, and for that price, you really can't go wrong with Aquaplus, so definitely check this game out if you see it for cheap enough. So the next game is one I actually heard about and picked up a couple of years ago, but didn't start playing it until recently, and that game is Baroque for the PS2 and Wii, developed by Sting Entertainment. This is a remake of a Sega Saturn game of the same name, but like most noteworthy Saturn titles, it never made it outside of Japan. Baroque is one of those games that lets you know exactly what you're getting into as soon as you boot it up. Is it enough that it has one of the best opening cinematics of any video game ever? But unlike most JRPGs that shove exposition in your face for the first hour, Baroque throws you right into the game. Without any explanation, you're thrown into the world, you meet this angel dude, he gives you a gun, and then he's like, "Hey you, take this and go to the bottom of the eerie looking tower. Good luck!" And I gotta say, I absolutely love Baroque's aesthetic. The world is best described as a dystopian post-apocalyptic future with religious themes. If you've ever seen Vampire Hunter D, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyways, Baroque is a dungeon crawler that plays very similarly to mystery dungeon games, like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon or Shiren the Wanderer. The floors are randomly generated with randomly placed items and enemies throughout the floor, and this is what I love about this game, the dungeon crawling. Baroque does an amazing job of immersing you in its atmosphere. There are very few games that make you feel the tension of being trapped in an inescapable dungeon surrounded by monsters that want to kill you in the same way Baroque does. The environment is extremely unsettling, which is made even more apparent with the short draw distance and the monsters. And I love the designs of these monsters. I was legitimately spooked when I saw some of these things for the first time. So going back to the gameplay, right below your health meter is your vitality meter, and it works kinda like the food meter in Minecraft. It gradually goes down over time, but as long as you have vitality, your health will keep regenerating. However, once you run out, you'll start taking damage. So on top of surviving against the monsters, you also have to keep your vitality up. How do you do this? By consuming vitality restoring food. But you can't solely rely on food because all the items on the floor are randomly generated. So the only reliable way to stay alive is to keep killing monsters and collecting their vitality restoring hearts. So don't think that you can just ignore the enemies and be okay. As you make your way down the tower, the game will start throwing new enemies at you with new attacks. So you have to constantly be upgrading your character to stay alive. And the way the story is told is that you learn more about your past through the characters inside the tower as you progress. And I like it. It's an interesting take on JRPG storytelling, and it's a way to tell the story without it getting in the way of the gameplay. The combat isn't amazing. I'd almost say it's clunky, but it's not terrible. It gets the job done. Other than that, my only real complaint is that the game does get boring after you've been playing it a while, so I recommend playing it in short bursts. And also, while the game's atmosphere does a great job of making you feel weak and helpless, this game is actually pretty easy. That being said, Baroque is definitely a game dungeon crawler fans, especially fans of mystery dungeon games, should check out. There's definitely a lot to love about it. On top of that, Baroque is also pretty cheap and is the only multi-platform game on this list. Both versions are pretty much identical, but if you have a choice, I'd say go for the Wii version because of the Wii's higher resolution and the fact that you have the option to use the Wiimote and Nunchuck or the classic controller. Okay, so up until this point, I've only talked about games that were made by other developers and then localized by Atlus USA. But for this last one, I'm going to talk about the exact opposite is the case. This is a game that was developed by Atlus Japan, but then for some reason localized by Sega in North America. And this was before Sega bought Atlus, by the way. So this is one that some of you might have heard of. It's a Dreamcast game called Maken X. Yeah, I don't know why Atlus didn't localize this game themselves, but as is the case with most Sega translations, especially 20 years ago, the translation is pretty bad, and the voice acting is even worse.
I'm Kei Sagami. I'm 16 years old, and I attend Jusei High School. I have no siblings.
While Maken X may have a butchered localization, it does have some pretty amazing gameplay that's the same throughout the Japanese and English releases. It's a first-person hack-and-slash with tank controls, which wasn't uncommon back when this game came out, and while some may criticize this game for being clunky, I feel the awkward control scheme is part of what makes the game fun, kinda how it does with Resident Evil, where getting accustomed to the controls is half the challenge. But what makes the combat unique is that it only uses one button. The goal is to hit your enemies at the right time, in the right place, which makes for some interesting strategies with multiple enemies on screen, and it makes killing enemies all the more satisfying. As you move on, the game will start throwing different kinds of enemies at you, each with their own weaknesses. Some may give you a hard time at first, but once you learn their weaknesses, you'll be able to take them down in just a few hits. And that's what I like about this game, the learning curve. In addition, if you die, you have to restart the stage, but after you've died, you'll know the stage and be able to speed your way through the parts you already completed. It's like trial and error, but in a way that's not frustrating. There's also this mechanic called brainjacking, where throughout the game you'll be able to take control of different characters, each of which have their own unique properties. And there are lots of characters to brainjack, which gives the gameplay a lot of variety. On top of that, this game looks great for a Dreamcast game, and I'm not just talking about the graphics. The art for this game is some of the best artwork I have ever seen in a video game. You might have recognized already that the artwork for this game is done by the legendary Kazuma Kaneko, and I think this is one of his best works, if not his absolute best. Man, everything Kaneko touches turns to gold, I swear. Though, it's important to keep in mind that Maken X is a 20-year-old game, and it's not without its flaws. I've dealt with things like the cursor randomly locking off while jumping, wonky hit detection, and the translation issues I mentioned earlier. Also, Maken X is pretty short. It has multiple endings, which makes it replayable, and depending on which one you go for, it can take anywhere between 5 to 10 hours your first time. Although, for the price you can get this game, that really isn't bad, especially compared to other old Atlus games. Usually you can get this game for anywhere between $8 and $15. Mach X is definitely a unique experience that no Dreamcast owner should pass up. Not a perfect game, but it's hard not to recommend it for the price. There's also a third-person remake on PS2 titled Mach Shao, but it was only released in Europe, and I've heard this version is a broken mess, so anyone in Europe who has played this game, tell me what you think of Mach Shao. Okay guys, that is it. Hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope y'all check some of these games out. I am definitely going to be making more of these videos in the future because there are a lot of underrated Atlus games that I want to talk about. I know I said that all of these games were cheap, but that is not going to be the case with every game in future videos because, unfortunately, Atlus games have short prints, which is why many of them are so rare. But until next time, tell me what are some of your guys' favorite Atlus games. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, I will see y'all later.